Welcome into Chalk Talk. Nick Camino, joined by Ben Axelrod. And Ben, I think before we get into some of the storylines and some of the sports headlines that we're going to hit, we should probably tell people what it is we're doing here, kind of the premise of Chalk Talk. And I think it starts back in May of 2018 when the Supreme Court lifted the federal ban on sports betting. And since that time, you've really seen the NBA seem very open-minded to sports wagering. Commissioner Adam Silver, Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner has done it. And even some of these leagues have linked up with things like DraftKings and FanDuel, and we've seen it more than ever. I think fantasy sports gambling, it's bigger than ever. So I think what we're trying to do is just tap into some of that interest.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not betting on sports and putting money down, which you can now do in more states than just Nevada, as you alluded to, I think it's almost like following the stock market, right? Where there are trends, there are indicators, there's analytics, there are metrics. Yeah. The sharps, as we call them, the smartest people follow, and it just gives you more information. It gives you more insight into what you're watching and predictors as to what could happen, not just for games, but for free agency, for championships, for trades, for MVP odds. I mean, there's odds for almost anything in the sports world, and yeah, I think that's what we're going to try to tackle is what these numbers mean and what they can tell you about the sports that you're watching on a nightly basis.
Yeah, and the interest is there. We're talking about an industry that's $500 billion, 1% of which I believe was only in the state of Nevada for the longest time. So the interest is there. March Madness is more popular than ever with pools, Super Bowl squares, all of that stuff.
Fantasy football.
Fantasy football, I mean, larger than ever. And who's not playing in a fantasy football league for some sort of cash? I mean, even if it's for a minimal amount, everybody seems to be doing it. So that's kind of the premise of Chalk Talk. We're going to have some fun with it. I don't think you'll get your stone cold 5-star lock of the week from here, but we may make some picks from time to time. Maybe you will. Maybe we'll get hot and we'll do that. So let's start with the Cleveland Browns, a team that is near and dear here to the city of Cleveland, a team that had a huge improvement in last season. You think about going from 0-16 to 7-8-1, and even though they're still not over the 500 mark, I think for the first time since Joe Thomas's rookie season, that was the last time they were a 500 team. It still feels like the hype is there. People feel really good about where this team is right now, and odds makers have them set at 9 wins. So you have the ability to bet over or under 9 wins. Ben, what do you think that says about where the Browns are at right now heading into year 2 of Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that the over is favored, but it's only slightly favored at -130, which means you'd have to lay a little bit more money to bet the over and return $100 than you would on the under. The under is +110. This number, though, it seems a little low to me when you consider they went 7-8-1 last year. The division has seemingly gotten worse. Baker Mayfield's expected to take a step forward in his second season. And then you look at adding Odell Beckham Jr., you look at adding Kareem Hunt. This is seemingly a team that's only gotten better. I think they've gotten better than what would really be a 1.5 win improvement from 7-8-1 a year ago. So I like the over here. I think -130 is actually probably favorable odds to take as far as betting the over. And I was just surprised when you consider, and I know we're going to get into the division odds, when you consider that they are favored to win the division, they're going to have to win more than 9 games to win the division. I think that this number seems a little bit low when you consider where the Browns were a season ago and the jump they're expected to make in 2019.
Well, we're not going to play this whole schedule game here, but I will say, I don't want to sound like a politician here either, but if they can get through those first 8 games, I feel like those first 8 games for any team would be difficult, especially now the Browns here with a new head coach and a lot of new faces. Those first 8 games are going to be very difficult. If they can survive those, though, man, the back end of that schedule where you're seeing teams like the Bills and the Dolphins, the Bengals twice, that's where I do think things lighten up, where you could see them pop over 9.
I think those first 3 weeks are going to tell us a lot about the Browns because they have 2 seemingly winnable games in the Titans and the Jets. I know the Jets is away and on Monday Night Football, but those are 2 teams the Browns are expected to be as good as, if not better than. Then they come home for their big Sunday night game against the Los Angeles Rams, obviously a team that was in the Super Bowl just a few months ago. I think where they walk, if they can walk out of that first 3 games at 2-1, I think they're going to have a real good chance to, at least keep pace to take advantage of the back end of that schedule. If they walk out of those first 3 games at 1-2, then I think then each game is only all the more dangerous as you move toward that back end of the schedule, which I agree with you is just a very manageable portion of the schedule as far as the Browns' talent level compared to other teams.
All right, so Ben mentioned the first 3 weeks of the schedule. Let's look at that Week 1 game against the Tennessee Titans. The Browns, at most sports books, are a 4.5-point favorite in that game. So, Ben, when you look at that, we were messing around a little bit before we started this. We know it's probably the one game that Marcus Mariota will definitely be healthy for if nothing happens in the preseason. But Titans are a pretty good team, but this number seems like it's right on. It's right there.
Yeah, and I think with the buzz the Browns are getting, I mean, that's one thing we talked about. It's going to be interesting to see how the Browns over-under win total is bet. It's going to be interesting to see how their division total is bet because they're kind of a sexy team in Vegas and in betting markets, just as far as, Baker Mayfield's a popular player. Adding Odell Beckham Jr. was a high-profile move. This is a team seemingly with a lot of buzz. I know they were getting a lot of Super Bowl bets. It's going to be interesting to see, though, how that 4.5 line against the Titans in Week 1, how it moves. Because these lines, they get set, and then they move based on where the money is bet. I wouldn't be surprised if that line didn't get bet up to 5.5 or 6 by the kickoff. And then it's going to be interesting to see, how that money, how it shakes out, who gets their returns on those bets. But 4.5 is, that's kind of, Bill Simmons calls it the Vegas zone, right?
Yeah,
because
that's right.
How many football games are decided by 4 points or 5 points? Not many. It's usually a 3-point game or a 6-point game, a 7-point game, or a 10-point game. That 4, 5, those aren't really scores that add up with the football numbers. So I think that kind of says that I think that Vegas and odds makers, they like the Browns, but they're scared to give them, to lay at least 6 points or lay 7 points. So it's going to be interesting to see how that line shakes out. But 4.5, that seems right. I'm just interested to see where it moves.
All right, you mentioned the division, the AFC North. Right now, the Browns at most betting places are the favorite to win the AFC North. I think the odds that we had here, Ben, they're at plus 125, which makes them the favorite over the Pittsburgh Steelers, over the Baltimore Ravens. I think all of us believe the Cincinnati Bengals will be dead last in the division. Right now, they're a long shot, 20-1. But do you buy the hype in that the Browns should be the favorite to win the division, or is this the markets kind of protecting themselves from some of those bets that are coming in? I mean, are you ready to say that the Steelers and the Ravens are not the team to beat in this division?
I think the fact that they're the favorites, but they're still at plus money, that you still get a better return betting on them than what you would risk, I think that's pretty telling. Okay. Because, to me, that's almost... They're not ready for you to lay that money yet. They still kind of want you to look toward the Steelers with that value. I think I'm surprised the Browns and Steelers aren't a little closer. I mean, plus 125 versus plus 165. It's a little bit off. I wouldn't. I'd probably put both teams closer to 135, 140. But yeah, I mean, I think you could probably flip a coin between the Browns and Steelers for the division just because the Steelers have been there before. But the Browns have the positive publicity on their side. The Steelers lose Antonio Brown, lose Le'Veon Bell, questions about Ben Roethlisberger's age, questions about that locker room as a whole. I think that... Yeah, I think the Browns being favored makes sense just in terms of Vegas protecting themselves and odds makers protecting themselves. I think the value in this division, though, is with the Ravens at plus 325. I mean, I'm not... Questions
at quarterback, though, right?
I'm not a huge Lamar Jackson fan, but they won the division last year with a rookie Lamar Jackson. He should only get better. That's, I liked what they did in the draft. That's an experienced coach in John Harbaugh. I just think that plus 325 number is just too big of a number not to get some value out of. So,
they got the defense.
Yeah,
we know that.
I think the Browns are going to win the division. And I think taking them at plus money is probably a good value in and of itself. But plus 325 for the division champs, and they're returning the bulk of their roster. I think that's a great value in Baltimore. All
right, we'll go back to football. We're going to hit college football before we get out of here on Chalk Talk, but let's also hit the NBA. It was Christmas in July with NBA free agency, all of that going down. to you, and we'll get into some of the odds. Right now, the Lakers are a big-time favorite to win the whole thing next year. They added Anthony Davis. But for you, Ben, was that the biggest storyline, the Lakers getting Davis, or was it what Brooklyn was able to do? What did you make of NBA free agency?
I think as far as the odds are concerned, Brooklyn, you almost push them aside because Kevin Durant's not going to be playing this year with the torn Achilles. So, I mean, Brooklyn can't win the title with Kyrie Irving as their best player. We just saw Kyrie Irving be the best player on a Boston team that lost in 5 games in the second round to Milwaukee. Yeah, I think the Lakers adding Anthony Davis automatically puts them in the title conversation when you just talk about having Anthony Davis and LeBron James on the same roster. If they get Kawhi Leonard now, I mean, they're going to be a significant favorite. They're going to be a Golden State Warriors-like favorite to win the NBA title. I think there's good value in Philadelphia at 10-1. But
I was going to say Golden State at 10-1. I mean, they haven't.
Yeah,
they lose Durant, but that's still a tremendous team before he showed up.
It is. I think the Klay Thompson injury kind of throws them into flux. I just think they're going to be playing from behind a lot as far as getting into the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be the top seed in the West or probably even have home court advantage. Denver at 18-1, I think, is incredible value when you look at they had the best record in the Western Conference a year ago. They returned the bulk of their roster. They're only going to get better. But yeah, as far as storylines, I think the Lakers adding a second star next to LeBron James and what they do with the rest of that roster. Do they add Kawhi Leonard? Do they fill it out with other role players, high-priced role players? I think that's what I'm keeping an eye on as far as free agency.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the NBA shakes out. It's crazy. We talk about it a lot in July.
It's year-round.
Yeah, it really has become a year-round league, and that's kudos to the NBA. All right, let's hit some college football before we get out of here. I just looked at the college football championship odds, and here we go again. Clemson and Alabama, those are the two overwhelming favorites. And I take it, Ben, and we're big college football guys. Neither of us are surprised about this. Those two programs have just become a machine and sort of the upper echelon in college football now.
I'm surprised. They're the co-favorites both at plus 225. I'm surprised that's the number.
I agree.
I'm surprised that you can get more than a 2-to-1 return on your investment, on your bet with both Alabama and Clemson, just because, look, if I were to give you Alabama and Clemson versus the field, I'd take Alabama and Clemson.
Both.
I mean,
this would be part 5, right, with them.
And just as far as following recruiting, these teams, for all the success they've had over the course of the last, in Clemson's case, 5 years, Alabama's case, closer to 10 years, they're only building on that success on the recruiting trail. I mean, they're not only head and shoulders above the rest of the teams on the field, they're head and shoulders above the rest of the teams on the recruiting on the recruiting field. So I like that value at plus 225 for both Alabama and Clemson. We're both Ohio State guys. Let's just put it out there. 9-to-1 odds. I know there's some questions mostly about head coach because
new coach.
Ryan Day's a first-year head coach, but I'm really intrigued with what Justin Fields can do at quarterback. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in all of college football. And then I think the other thing about that is I think Ohio State is head and shoulders the best team in the Big Ten. And I know it hasn't worked out for the Big Ten champion, 3 years running now, making the college football playoff. But I still think that more times than not, if you win the Big Ten, you're going to make the college football playoff. And if Ohio State can win the Big Ten, and I think they will, they're in the college football playoff, and that puts you just 2 wins away from winning the national title. So I think the best value on here is Ohio State at 9-to-1, but I think Alabama and Clemson at plus 225. I think that's incredible value for both teams.
Where are you at on Michigan? It seems like they're getting a lot of hype again, and I don't know, the schedule doesn't look too difficult. I know they sprinkle in Notre Dame in the middle of the season. That's weird, but where are you at on them?
I've been a big Jim Harbaugh fan just in terms of what he's been able to do since getting there. But you've got to show it to me now on the field. You've got to
be on the hot
Big Ten.
seat at some point, right?
He has had opportunity after opportunity to win the Big Ten, and he hasn't done it. He hasn't beaten Ohio State yet. So to me, it's kind of don't tell me, show me. That's right. Where I'm at with Michigan.
All right, last thing we'll hit here, one of the games of the week, because it'll be on August 24th. That's coming up here already at the end of the summer. The Florida Gators taking on the Miami Hurricanes. That game is going to be in Orlando. It was at Camping World Stadium, a neutral site game, but a lot of Florida folks will be heading there, Miami folks. Interesting quarterback situation with Miami Hurricanes. Tate Martell, Ohio State transfer. You think this is a good fit for him?
It's going to be really interesting to see just because Tate Martell kind of underperformed on campus at Ohio State. Obviously, he didn't have the opportunity to start per se playing behind first JT Barrett and then playing behind, obviously, Dwayne Haskins. But he didn't have a great spring in Miami. And Miami has been taking a lot of flyers on quarterbacks. They've been trying to figure out that quarterback situation for a while now. I like Manny Diaz, though, the head coach that Miami hired. He was
never really left. He was gone to Temple. He took the Temple job and then had to go back.
But I think, Miami has had these signs of a resurgence, but they just couldn't get over that hump with Mark Richt, and they were obviously one of the more, I thought, disappointing teams in college football last year. But I thought everything that they had right going for them was because of Manny Diaz on that defensive side of the ball. You look at some of the NFL players that they've been able to produce. I'm going to be interested. I think they might need a buffer year here with Manny Diaz, just in terms of him really putting his imprint on the program as a head coach, as opposed to as a defensive coordinator. But I like Miami. I like Manny Diaz, and I'm a child of the late '90s, early 2000s. I'm always intrigued by the U, and I hope they can pull it together. But yeah, I think that's what, the first weekend of college football, and that's the only game. I think that's going to be a tremendous game between the Gators and the Hurricanes.
Getting 7.5, the Hurricanes, what would we say there? I think that might be enough. The Gators, I love the Gators defense all the time, but they haven't shown me enough offensively. I know Mullen's there now, but I don't know. Yeah,
I think those weekend games, those opening weekend games in the neutral site, it seems like they're either super tight games or they're big blowouts.
True.
And maybe that's because
we saw LSU and Miami, Florida at the start of last year in Arlington.
Yeah,
I think that was.
Push come to shove right now, I think I'd have to take the Gators. I'd have to lay the points. I think they're just further along in where their program is. And even though it's a neutral site game, Orlando is, for all intents and purposes, Gators country. So I think I would have to go with Florida there. But if that line could get pushed closer to 9, 8, 8.5, I think I have to might look at the Canes.
Sounds like a bet. All right, for Ben Axelrod, I'm Nick Camino. This has been Chalk Talk.